Hi, I'm Jeremy, and right now I am about to talk about the sort of the first half of the Mexican Revolution, and so I've started this sort of tradition. Started last year when I created history videos for my to help my peers study for the history final, 10th grade history final. And so I started making videos like that, and I really like doing that, and I really just like making videos and teaching. Maybe some people don't like it when I do that, but I mean, for me, I like it. This year I'm going to try and do some more of that. If not, I'll stop. But, for right now, I want to continue doing that. And so this video is going to be created about the first part of the Mexican Revolution. So, with that, let's get into it. So, Mexico at this time, so at the very beginning, was under the rule of Porfirio Diaz. And this was a 34... so this guy ruled for 34 years in Mexico. He seized power in 1876. He was kind of backed by military personnel, and he was also backed up by American capitalists. And these capitals actually wanted to support him because the previous ruler of Mexico was quote-unquote anti-American. So, and you'll see how American capitalism sort of plays into Mexico's revolution. So Diaz rules for 34 years. This period is called the Porfiriado, which, for his name, that makes sense. One way he earned the people's trust was he had an idea called no re-election. So he became president, that was good, but he said, you know what, after that, I'm not going to be president anymore, someone else will take my place. And he actually follows this for a little bit. He gets General Manuel Gonzalez to rule for him, but he's kind of like a puppet, and Diaz is the puppeteer, if you will. And then he returned in 1884 to actually continue his power, his reign. So during his first term, he allowed freedom of the press, and that seems pretty good. And then that changes later, where he becomes known for his oppression of the press. He is very famous for his use of brute force to hush anyone who speaks out against him. He favored landowners, foreign capitalists, and they supported him. And so basically they had this kind of cycle of I support you, you support me, and this is how it all works out. So right off the bat, if you want to know something about Porfirio Diaz, he liked foreign businessmen. He liked anything that made the economy go up, anything that made the economy good. And so like I said, he protected these landowners, these American landowners in Mexico, and he would protect their land. And he'd always say he's on the people's side of things. He would say yeah, I am a good person. The people is my number one priority. But he would often send troops to suppress peasant resistance to land seizures. So basically what he would do is he'd take land, give it to these American businessmen, these awesome, rich guys, while he takes land. And those who oppose him are brutally, destroyed. And he actually was very famous about building a U.S. railroad construction in Mexico. That's one of the things that's one good thing about him. He supported the railroad industry, and so that, makes transportation quicker. You can transport resources quicker. You can make a lot of money off of, stops. That's good. So like I said, his key really was to achieve anything that made the economy go. Anything that made the economy good, he liked. Even if it came to, breaking promises he made about helping the people, even if it came to using brutal repression in order to get Mexico in a good economic state. He had this sort of way of interacting with rich Mexicans or rich people in general, which was called pan o palo. And if you know Spanish, you know that means bread or club. So basically, he'd go, okay, hey, you're rich. I like that. I want you to work for me. I want to make you even richer. I want to use you for the sake of Mexico. Won't you want to be part of that? This awesome grand scheme of Mexican awesomeness. And usually people would say, yeah, I'm in. I definitely want to be a part of this. And so he would say, all right, good, here's all this stuff. And he would actually live up to that. That was pretty good. Those who said, I'm good, I'll pass, great offer, but, we'll just pass. That's when the palo comes in, the club. Anyone who kind of declined his offer were faced with heavy threats and beatings, murder, and prison. Actually, the most notorious prison at this time was called the Belen prison, which was equivalent to the Mexican Bastille. The French Bastille. Mexican Bastille for this case. He also used the rurales, the rurals, and the bravi. Now, there's a difference between them in a way. The rurales were from, were basically they're the countryside police, secret police-ish. And the bravi were the police in urban cities. And these guys were like the president's own personal hitmen. So they would go out, attack those who did not, support Diaz. Anyone who would, any, group that sort of revolted against Diaz, they would be put down. And so, as I'm saying, he really values the economy. That's really good, but he doesn't care that much about how he obtains it. The end justifies the means in a way. He really wants to get Mexico in a great state, but he wants to really keep all the power for himself and make sure no one else is there to threaten his power. When it comes to Diaz's army, it was not that great. I mean, of course you had the Bravi and the Rurales, but other than that, these guys weren't really well equipped for national defense. I mean, Diaz picked his generals not by skill, but by how loyal they were to him. This is kind of like a spoils thing in a way. But anyway, he does not like that. And he does not like that, that if you're not in his army, whatever. Okay, anyway. Basically, Diaz gives you a military position. Who cares if you know diddly squat about, strategy and how to win battles? It's all about if you really support him. And that's going back to those offers that he talks about. Hey, I really like you. You're a rich guy. I like that. Join the army. Help make Mexico better. That's really what he's focused on. And he also makes ties with the church. His wife, Carmen Romero Rubio, suggested that he actually make ties with the church. And basically, he made an agreement with the church that said, all right, church, I'll let you, survive. I'll let you do whatever you want to do. One condition: you cannot speak out anything against what I do. You cannot do all these things that criticize what I say. And other than that, you're good to go. Just don't criticize me. And the church is like, okay, yeah, good deal. All right, well, the church is alive. And unfortunately to that part of that deal is they had to turn a deaf ear to all this oppression, all this repression, all this political injustice. Diaz is also famous for having científicos. Now, if you know Spanish, científicos means scientists, scientific, whatever. And these guys, not necessarily scientific, but science, the idea of science is related to the idea of modernization, to modernize things, to make things progress. Don't look back at the past, forget tradition, go with the flow. And so these científicos really wanted, their belief was like, good economy is a good way to achieve modernity. Improving transportation systems, having railroads, that's a good way of doing it. And that seems good in a way, but the worst part about it is that they are they do not like tradition, especially indigenous people. They do not like indigenous beliefs, anything indigenous, anything traditional about Mexico. They want to get rid of. They are very famous for supporting taking away ejidos, and ejidos are basically indigenous tribal land. So and they're very famous for discriminating against indigenous people. So basically, they're kind of like bigots. Now, before I say anything more about Diaz's bad stuff, let me tell you about a couple good things he did. He improved harbor and docking facilities, so that's good. He improved the streetcar system. He improved infrastructure. He improved banks. There was low crime, and overall, basically, this is he's very famous for actually maintaining stability. After all, he ruled for 34 years, and no one was successfully able to defeat him yet. We'll get into that later. And then some ideas seem good at first, but you really, it's really gilded. And there's something worse underneath. So, for example, education. Primary schools, he said primary school was mandatory, and school is free. However, usually these opportunities were filled by rich kids. The poor, most poor kids dropped out after 1 year. So, great idea, but no, it doesn't work necessarily. Like I said, native lands were being taken away, ejidos were taken away, and those who resisted were basically killed or sent to sugar plantations. One example is the Yaquis. I think they're from this area, I believe. I'm not sure, but they basically said, yeah, we don't want you taking our land, and Diaz said, fight me. And they did, and the Yaquis were utterly defeated, and they were sent to work for sugar plantations. And if you study history, the one plantation you don't want to work on are sugar plantations, because those are brutal. Like lots of people, if you work on a sugar plantation, chances are you are you're gonna die. The conditions are horrible. You work your back off. It's not good. So there's another term you have to know. It's called the hacienda. The hacienda is basically large land, and those who own haciendas are hacendados. And this is basically like, plantations. Your land worked by peasants, and you basically make a lot of money off of that. And as you can tell, land plays a very key issue in the Porfiriado, because land is the basis of money. Land is how Mexico is good friends with the United States in a way. American businessmen like to buy haciendas. They like to buy ejidos and make money off of that. And Mexicans make money off of this too. They get money, and they just keep taking away more land, so it can be used for industrialization or selling it to American capitalists. And that's not good for everyone else. But of course, if you like business and you think whatever makes the economy good is necessary, then I would say Porfirio is doing a pretty good job. Another thing, hacendados often tricked illiterate natives to giving up their land for little cost. It's kind of like what happened in the United States, coercion, basically saying if you don't sign it, we'll beat you up. Or that's probably in some cases that happened, but usually it's like, this means I pay you a bunch of money, but really it doesn't. Like, they're tricking them. That's not good. And actually, at this point, the United States owns 23% of Mexican land, and this kind of makes the statement Mexico, mother to foreigners, stepmother to Mexicans, where they're basically, the Mexicans are sort of kissing up to the Americans, trying to get the Americans to buy land so they can get more money. Now, another bad thing about Diaz is he actually increased the number of bars in Mexico. Now, if there are more bars, that means basically more people are going to drink, maybe one too many, and die. So alcoholism, which was very alcoholism and death by alcoholism was rising, unfortunately, because many people, many peasants were drinking, and they were basically drinking about what, they were sad and their life sucked. So basically, that sucked, obviously, and Mexican. Another thing you should know about the Mexican economy, it focused on the U.S., who the U.S. Kind of controlled the mining industry and the oil business. So the United States is making the United States is saying, okay, we'll drill your stuff if like we get part of the profit. So this is another way that Mexico makes money. So if you want to get something out of the Porfiriado, basically lots of money. It's good. You basically see how money is made. However, it comes at a cost of humanity, political being able to say what you want to say, political activism, and that's not good. Trade, work unions, those were not allowed. You were not allowed to have a trade union. Wages were cut. Even minimum wages were cut, and that was not good. Eventually, if basically most of the people in Mexico are unhappy, you're bound to get something to come up. So in Veracruz, which is right here, as you can see, I made a little bit of a map of Mexico, not too well, but Veracruz is like right here. And so there was a textile strike in Veracruz. There was also a more famous one in Cananea, which is in Sonora. This one's famous because this is an American mining company, copper mine, I believe, and the owner of that, William Green, he didn't know what to do, so he had to call in the Arizona Rangers. And Arizona's basically like right here. So the Arizona Rangers and the Rurales come in and they hang all the leaders, and basically it's kind of like an example, like you mess with us, we're gonna mess with you. And this sparked more resistance. Like, for example, Ricardo Magon. He and his brothers, the Magon brothers, they formed the Liberal Party, or the PLM for short, if that makes sense. And they're mad at him because, this is political repression. They're not allowed to say what they want to say, so they make this party to speak out against Diaz. And so, if you think that the people are unhappy, well, you would kind of think that the hacendados are happy, right? I mean, they're making money, right? Well, not exactly, because the Mexican government favors U.S. capitalists, favors foreign capitalists, like to that extent, that the Mexican, the rich guys, they want to get richer, but all those opportunities of getting rich are taken away by the Americans and Europeans, the capitalists, and so they're upset. For example, Madero, who will play a much more important role later, he's very upset about this. He wants to make more money. So this kind of anti-American sentiment is kind of forming in this time, and also Madero was scared that if Diaz kept ruling, then he would spark something that would totally change the government, and they would lose any opportunity of being rich ever again, and so they didn't want that. More strikes occur, and this is where kind of it all comes to an end for Porfirio. Bernardo Reyes. He is a wealthy guy. He isn't a very good friend of the Científicos, so he's not on very good terms with them, and he runs for vice president. Now, some people say he ran for president, some people say he ran for vice. At least in the textbook that Mr. Page printed us, he said that he ran for vice president, but if Diaz stayed in power, Diaz would eventually leave, and vice president would become president. So if you want to make that connection, that works. And Bernardo Reyes also supports this book called Great National Problems. It was written by Andres Enriquez. And this is basically criticizing Diaz about how the economy should go, or how basically how money should be regulated. Um, and how this 34 reign, if you will, comes to an end. It comes to an end via an election. So Madero, remember that guy? He decides to run for president. He says he's gonna defeat Diaz. He wants to win, and he's going to create democracy. And you'll find out later that by democracy he really means democracy of the elite. He wants to give the impression that everyone's participating, but not really. He says Diaz's political repression is counterproductive, which, yeah, it is. That makes sense. He claims that he will give back the ejidos, so that makes sense. That's a very good way to get people to go, yeah, I want to support this Madero guy. And he joins the anti-re-electionist policy, or party, sorry, not policy. So I remember, so how would Diaz still rule for 34 years? Well, because he'd keep having these sort of fake elections where he would rig it every single time so he'd win. So Madero's like, okay, yeah, we know what you're doing. You're getting reelected. Well, we're anti that, so that makes sense. Diaz, I mean, he's ruled for 34 years. He's not too worried about this Madero guy. I'm good. We're good. And then he sees how popular Madero is. Madero is really speaking to the people. He's the man of the people. He's not doing this for Hacendado reasons. He's not doing this for elite reasons. He's doing this for the people. And so the people are like, yeah, Madero doesn't sound like a bad idea. Let's do that. So in order to rig the election, he jails Madero. He says, you're going to jail. Go away. So if Madero's in jail, how can he win the election? Diaz wins. Everything seems good, and he's like, okay, now I've won, Madero, you can leave. Now Madero, he goes to Texas. On this map, it's like right here. He goes to Texas, and he basically writes his famous plan, El Plan de San Luis Potosí. Now, San Luis Potosí is basically like, I believe it's like right here in this region. I put it like a little blob right here because I didn't know exactly what it looked like entirely. But this is San Luis Potosí. Now, question, if you name a plan after this region, shouldn't you be in it? Well, he's not there. He's actually in San Antonio. So, why wouldn't you call it the Plan de San Antonio? Well, I mean, if there's anti-American sentiment, resentment going on, then it would just basically ruin all of his chances. He's saying, yeah, I wrote this awesome plan about awesome Mexico in America. Like, of all the places to, name, to basically name and create this plan, you don't want to do it in the United States, because that's where the United States is very famous for having capitalist companies in Mexico. So that's not good. So he says it's in San Luis Potosí. And he basically says, okay, Diaz, he sucks. This is why. And then he says, I'm awesome. This is why. And I will do this, and I will defeat Diaz, and I will be the awesome provisional president. He doesn't really explain what reforms he's going to necessarily make, or in specific detail. It's kind of vague, but I mean, as long as the people thought, as long as he had a chance against Diaz, as long as it wasn't Diaz and it was slightly better, they would be willing to go for it. Basically, Madero gains the support of a Chihuahuan family. This is Chihuahua right here. It's actually slightly too big now that I think about it, but he gets the support of this other famous Hacendado family, the Terraza family. And they also they don't trust Diaz too much, for the same reasons that Madero doesn't trust them. And then some other famous Mexican heroes start to make their mark in history. So we have Pascual Orozco. And you also have Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa is actually from Durango, and he plays a much more important. He plays an important role in Chihuahua later. And Zapata. Now Zapata is from this region like right here called Morelos. It's actually a very small state, but it's a very powerful one. So Pascual Orozco and Pancho Villa start fighting against Diaz's armies in the north, especially in Chihuahua. While Zapata in Morelos is fighting everyone else in there. And so now you have Orozco, Villa, Zapata, Madero, the Terrazas, 90% of the people, everyone's against him, and he's losing. So that's not good. In case you need to know, the first shot of the revolution was shot in Puebla, which is basically like right here. This kind of curved region right here, and it was shot on November 18th, 1910. So that's a date you probably want to know. So Diaz realizes, this isn't a good idea. So he decides just to give the presidency to Madero. He signs the Treaty of Ciudad Juarez on May 21st. And on May 25th, 1911, Diaz leaves. But he has some awesome last words. He says, Madero has unleashed a tiger. Now let's see if he can control it. And you'll see that, unfortunately, he can't control it. So Madero comes in, and newsflash, he sucks, honestly. He sucks. Now, the thing about Madero, he said all these things to get support from the people, but he really never had the people's interest in mind. He didn't want to change the old regime. He just wanted to have himself lead. He wanted to, help throw the bones to the people here and there. But really, he wanted just to, keep things the way they were. He allowed some of the Diaz's old comrades to stay in the government. So that's odd. And then he starts giving land to all of his buddies. And he says, Zapata, come here. I'm going to give you some land. You were an awesome soldier. Thank you for fighting in the revolution. Here's some land. Now, if there's one thing you want to know about Zapata, Zapata really, some people claim to do things for their people. But this guy was really all about the people. He wanted to break up haciendas, give it to the poor. People who didn't even have land, give them land. And so he was basically kind of like a Robin Hood type of figure. Steal from the rich and give to the poor. And when Madero gives him this land and says, oh yeah, I'm not going to help the people. Yeah. Zapata is furious about this. He doesn't like that. He was like, I just fought for you. I believed in you. And, how can you just do that? I thought this was an actual revolution. But you don't want a revolution. You just want to be in power. And that's kind of how that went. And Zapata was like, you know what? Screw you. I don't like you. So, basically, that's not good. Madero had conservative trends. Like I said, Porfiriodistas could stay in power. And as I said before, he gave the people the illusion that there was a democracy happening. He's like, after all, I'm not Diaz, I'm not a dictator. But he really he wasn't that much different than Diaz. He wasn't looking for a radical new government. He still kind of wanted to befriend American capitalists in a way, a little bit. He was actually, if anything, he was opposed to land reform, which is what Pancho Villa and Zapata wanted. He was opposed to land reform because it would come at the expense of the haciendas and the hacendados. So he's like, I want to really just be friends with the hacendados. People, do whatever you want. I don't care. But he wanted to focus on the hacendados. He was very sympathetic to the upper class, and he wanted to make sure that they were okay. He wanted them to survive. So that was not good. And so Zapata, like I said, he's upset about this. He's like the one who's like the most upset about this. Villa is okay with this. He likes Madero. And Orozco, he's also sort of like a sympathetic to the upper class a little bit. But yeah, he also doesn't like Madero. So Zapata famously goes and he creates the Plan de Ayala. And I know about this because I actually had to do a presentation in Mr. Page's class about this. And he basically said, okay, Diaz was bad, this is why. Madero, we support Madero because this is what he did. But Madero sucks because he didn't accomplish any of these things. And we are going to divide up land. We are going to... anyone who doesn't support this plan is a traitor. And Madero, get the hell out of here, or else we will come after you. And Madero actually publishes this plan in his newspaper because he thinks that no one else would really trust Zapata. They'd actually probably hate him more. And Zapata wasn't literate; like he couldn't write that much. He couldn't write, so he had a bunch of spelling errors and grammatical errors. So Madero's like, it's okay, you can publish it. When he publishes this plan becomes really popular to the people. The people actually like what Zapata is saying. In fact, they like Zapata even more than Madero. So Madero realizes this is a backfire. So Madero sends troops to crush Zapata's revolt, but overall, this doesn't really affect them. Orozco befriends the Terraza family from Chihuahua, and through a little bit of bribery, it says in the textbook that he decides to go and fight against Madero. And that's odd because I thought Madero liked the Terrazas liked Madero, but that's not true. I guess because they probably felt that he was giving too much leeway to the people, which really he wasn't giving any at all, basically. Maybe a little bit. Bernardo Reyes, remember that guy who ran for vice president? Yeah, he's also against Madero. So he fights in the north, up here. So now you have Orozco, Terraza, Zapata. Zapata's a big one. Bernardo Reyes. That's not good. Emilio Vasquez Gomez captures the city of Juarez. Juarez actually was conquered by Madero through Villa and Zapata. They were actually, Juarez is like at the edge of the border. It's right next to this American town. So, Madero actually told him not to conquer that place because if a bullet went out and it killed an American, it would be a whole disaster, and Madero would have to fight Diaz and the United States. But Villa and Zapata did it anyway, and they got the city of Juarez without any Americans getting hurt. But now, sort of like a counter-revolution is starting to spark, and it's actually supported through those who kind of sympathize with Diaz. Let me see something, just to make sure I didn't skip anything. Yeah, I didn't skip. All these people are against him, and actually one guy in particular is also against him, this guy named Felix Diaz. And if Diaz sounds familiar, it should sound familiar because Felix Diaz is the nephew of Porfirio Diaz. Now, Diaz leads a revolt, this fails, he gets arrested, and when he's in jail, he actually meets up with Bernardo Reyes, and they decide to make a counter-revolution to bring back, not necessarily Diaz, but bring back Diaz's sort of government. Basically, anything that basically did not help the people at all, but only helped the rich. So they meet, and Madero now has to fight all these guys, and there's only one competent general in his army, this guy named Victoriano Huerta. He will play a major role later. He was Diaz's not personal general, but he fought for Diaz, and then he fought for Madero. And now I don't think it's going to turn out too well for Diaz. So what happens is basically Felix Diaz, Bernardo Reyes, and Huerta actually all come to basically form sort of a counter-revolution. And the Americans also get into this a little bit. They have this guy named Henry Lane Wilson. And Henry Lane Wilson, he was a U.S. ambassador, but he didn't like Madero that much because Madero was actually, he didn't like American capitalists that much. What happened is when American capitalists said, "Oh, can I buy that land?" or even though I'm not that great, can you still give me money? Diaz had this awesome spoils system, so are we still doing that? And Madero said, no spoils system, you don't get anything, go away. So Henry Lane Wilson realizes this is a huge defeat for the United States. After all, I mean, they're losing a lot of their money is coming from Mexico, so they're losing a lot of money in Mexico. So he has to do something to protect American businesses in Mexico, to protect American profit. Basically, what happens is Wilson allies himself with Felix Diaz, Bernardo Reyes, and Victoriano Huerta to attack Madero. So how this all works out is that there's a march on the palace on February 9th, 1913. And Huerta makes a fake defense, like, oh, I'll protect you, Madero, pew, 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 pew. But, he's really trying not to kill them. He's actually he's going to eventually overthrow Madero. And this idea of backstabbing Madero will kind of haunt Huerta later a little bit. Bernardo Reyes is killed in battle. We're not sure if this was accidental or purposefully. It could be seen like, oops, I shot Reyes, or it could be like, Huerta told me to shoot him so that way, we wouldn't have him in the way. So we don't really know, but Bernardo Reyes is killed in battle. So Huerta eventually stops fighting the enemy. He himself marches, and basically they get Madero to basically give up his presidency to Huerta. And this period of Madero's the next period in history for 10 days is called La Decena Trágica. And this is a period from Madero's basically kicking out of presidency sort of thing, and his death. So Madero's brother, first of all, is killed. And then Huerta takes control. Felix Diaz is actually out of the way because Huerta basically says, "You, Felix, go sell something in Japan. I want to make a business deal there." And Felix Diaz is like, "Si, senor." And he goes to Japan, and Huerta's like, "Sucks for you, buddy. Now I'm in control." So we never hear from Felix Diaz ever again. Now the question comes: what should happen to Madero? So we're not sure what happened, who gave the okay, but 10 days after Madero was kicked from the presidency, he was assassinated by Aureliano Blanquet. And some say this. Mr. Page personally says that it was actually Huerta who said, go kill Madero. And they tried to say, oh, Madero, we didn't kill him in cold blood. He was trying to escape, and we had to shoot him down. Of course, this doesn't actually work too well. The people are actually even madder because Madero was killed. Zapata decides to continue to battle hacendados. People from Sonora, Chihuahua, and Coahuila. This is Coahuila. They all form. They sort of kind of form an alliance against Huerta. They don't like Huerta. And what else is there? Many liberal hacendados don't like Huerta. The middle class don't like Huerta. Miners, industrial workers, peasants don't like Huerta. So it's basically anyone who kind of joins power at this point, no one likes. And that's the thing, that's just a pause from the Mexican Revolution. That's something about it, where, basically each group, the wealthy and the poor, are arguing for direct opposite things. The rich guys want all the benefits for them. They don't want any benefits for the poor. And the poor kind of want the exact opposite. They don't want the rich to keep getting richer. They want to get rich. And so basically, whoever is ruling Mexico, he kind of has to choose. If he chooses the hacendados, the people hate him, like Diaz. If he chooses the people, well, then the hacendados don't like him. And Madero actually tries to appease both, but he's not doing enough, so both hate him. So no matter what, you're always going to have someone who doesn't like you in this government. And another thing that's important is that everyone in Mexico is, talking about these things. People from all the way in Chihuahua are talking about like down here in Morelos. They're talking about they're all talking about like all these revolutionary ideas. So basically, this is not just like little battle in the capital. This is like a national issue. Everyone is fighting each other just to get what they want. And that's something that makes kind of the Mexican Revolution very tragic, because so many people are are in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they just are not appreciated. So back to Huerta. So Huerta is hated by everyone. Villa actually controls Chihuahua and Juarez. So now basically Villa, even though he's from Durango, he basically kind of owns Chihuahua. He's conquered it. He's done a really good job at that. People like Villa because, one, he reduced meat prices. He created many schools, and he said that the government will take over any pro-Huerta businesses. Villa gave land to his comrades, so he wasn't exactly like Zapata, where Zapata gave it directly to the people. He gave it to his comrades, which is kind of like a good idea, and he gave the rest to the state. He said the state should decide what will happen to the land. So it wasn't necessarily for the people, but he did lean towards helping the people. It was more like his thing. He was also people criticized him for being too socialist, especially the United States. The United States didn't like Pancho Villa, especially Woodrow Wilson, who said that he was a bigamist. I believe that's the word, which basically means he has more than one wife, and he has so many children. He said that he had enough children to fill up all the universities and all the schools in Mexico. So, he had sort of a playboy style life, but he was overall he kind of leaned towards helping the people, and he's not Woodrow Wilson isn't wrong about the idea of him being socialist. I mean, after all, this is for the sake of the people, and this isn't really this isn't necessarily rewarding them because of their hard work. I mean, yes, they did work, but it's more like giving them because they kind of deserve it in a small way. And that's, Woodrow Wilson didn't find that too capitalist enough. Speaking of Woodrow Wilson, he didn't like Huerta either. Huerta, he said, was a drunken Indian. And, so he's obviously kind of like a racist. And Woodrow Wilson also doesn't like Huerta because Woodrow Wilson was a bit of a moralist. And he didn't like a ruler who backstabbed like his ruler so that way he could take power for himself. He didn't like that idea. So that didn't work out. Also, Huerta, for the Mexicans, isn't good. So early on in the revolution, there was something called the Casa del Obrero Mundial. And that was basically a workers' union against anyone who was basically trying to cut wages or make life like horrible. And so Huerta says, okay, you know what, I'm gonna help you people a little bit, and he helps them a little bit early on in his reign, but later he decides he's against his reforms, and he actually closes Casa del Obrero Mundial. So that's not good. And so this also doesn't really, basically everyone doesn't like Huerta at this point. A notable person from the mix of all these things is a guy named Carranza. Venustiano Carranza. Venustiano, there we go. He's from Coahuila, and he's also a hacendado. He basically, he fought in Diaz's army, then he helped Madero, and then he's against Huerta. And he creates this Plan de Guadalupe. And this is basically kind of similar to Madero, where he's like, you know what, Huerta sucks, I should be in power. I'm not going to explain why I should be in power, or I'm not going to explain like what reforms I'm necessarily going to make. But overall, this is what I'm going to do. Like this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take down Huerta. He wants and many people actually I don't really like Carranza personally because it actually kind of seems that he really just wants the power. He's rich. He just really just wants to have more power. And he's very nationalistic. He doesn't like Americans at all. Even when Americans try to help him, he's like, no, I don't want that. Go away. Shoot. None of that. And he's very sympathetic to the upper class. So as you can see, like all these rulers who come to power are very sympathetic to the upper class. They really, they're actually leaning more towards the hacendados rather than the people. And that's a very common mistake because the people usually end up, being the most angry at them, and that's not good. And Villa joins Carranza's army, Carranza's most faithful ally is Obregón. And Obregón is from Sonora. Now, Obregón, he was an excellent military commander. At this time, World War I is occurring, and he's making sure he wants to, he's also into this idea of modernity. He wants to improve, especially like how war is fought. Like he's going to introduce machine guns, and he's going to introduce barbed wire later. And also, another thing about him, he doesn't like the church. That will come into play later. And then he also, he is very sympathetic to rising middle class and upper class. He wants to really help them. He wants to make them richer. So not necessarily for the poor, but at least, he's trying to help those who are semi-rich become rich. And so, that's why lots of people actually like him a little bit. Then this Huerta's reign kind of comes to an end. So what happens is, as I said, Woodrow Wilson becomes president in 1913. He doesn't like Huerta. He calls Huerta a drunken Indian, and he illegitimately obtained the power. Another thing that he didn't like is, so Americans always want to get business in Mexico. But right now, Woodrow Wilson kind of feels that Huerta favors British and German capitalist movements rather than American. So it's kind of like backstabbing America. It's like, hey, we've been trade partners for a long time. How come you're choosing them over me? I thought we had something. I thought we had a connection. I thought you cared about me and I cared about you. And Huerta's like, nah, I like Diaz better. So he doesn't like Huerta. Woodrow Wilson, in fact, does like Carranza. Now, the reason why he likes Carranza is a hacendado. He understands the rich. He speaks rich. All right. He understands what rich struggles, and also the textbook actually says that Woodrow Wilson actually wanted to use Carranza to control Carranza. He said, okay, Carranza, this is what I want you to do. I want you to defeat Huerta, and I want you to make life. I want you to sort of prioritize American businesses. And he kind of feels like Carranza will listen, but Carranza doesn't, because Carranza is very nationalistic. He's like, American, what are you doing here? I don't trust you. Go away. Just go. No. So he doesn't like Americans that much. Huerta, he tries to make a defense because he knows that all these guys are fighting him. Pancho Villa is very notorious against Huerta. In Coahuila, this region called Torreon. Torreon is where Pancho Villa had one of his most famous battles, and he won against Huerta. If you're an Audi student and you're right now in my IB history class, you'll know that this was basically like the climax for the movie, the 2003 movie, and starring Pancho Villa as himself, which tells the story of how Pancho Villa kind of got in the mix of the movie business. So right now, basically, that doesn't go well for Huerta. Huerta tries to make a defense. He has Mexico City. He wants Mexico City to train themselves to be ready to fight. So everyone's training for schools, especially schools. Military uniforms are mandatory in schools, and military training was mandatory in the curriculum. It was mandatory in the curriculum. This didn't work out too well. Huerta didn't work. This sort of like city army didn't really work out too well. And then another thing that happened is the Tampico incident. Now, Tampico, is right here. It's above Veracruz. And what happens is, so the Navy so the U.S. is really concerned about United States businesses in Mexico. So they're like, you know what? Let's just send our Navy in just to check it out, just in case Carranza really wants us. Woodrow Wilson at this point is practically kissing up to Carranza. He really wants to get Carranza to like him, so he can control Carranza. So he's like, I'm just gonna send these ships here to possibly help Carranza, maybe not. And then Huerta comes, and Huerta's forces arrest the U.S. ship. And they're like, who are you? Why are you on this? Why are you on here? And they're like, well, we stopped for gas. We stopped for gas. I mean, we weren't going to attack you. We just came here just to stop for gas. So Huerta's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I am honestly so sorry. And the Americans are like, that's okay. We just want you to do one thing. We want you to do a 21 gun salute to our American flag. Now, in case you don't know what a 21 gun salute, it involves seven soldiers to fire 3 bullets. Now, 7 times 3, 21 gun salute. Now, Huerta realizes if he does this, if he salutes the American flag, he's pro-American, and then everyone else will hate it even more. This would be like committing political suicide. So Huerta says no. The United States are like, aha, you don't like us. So they go all around. They basically go all the way here to Veracruz and they basically conquer Veracruz. Huerta's forces are overrun. The U.S. Navy. Another reason why the U.S. Navy came around is you'll hear that one of the reasons why the United States joined World War I was something called the Zimmerman Telegram. And that's basically the Germans saying, okay, if you just support us, we'll help you, we'll give you arms so that way you can attack the United States and possibly get some of your states back. Maybe. So Huerta is like, I like you, German. I think I might go with that deal. And so German ships are coming in. They're gonna give the arms. So what Woodrow Wilson wants to do is just send a navy here to intercept those arms, so they don't fall into the hands of Huerta. And so the U.S. takes over Veracruz, and they actually do a pretty good job. They clean up the ports and everything, and they start collecting revenue here. So they're making money. And so those German arms are going to be given to Obregón to fight against Huerta, and then all this money is going to be collected for the U.S. purposes and possibly Carranza's purposes. Now you'd think if Carranza is obviously anti-Huerta, so you'd think that Carranza would actually be very happy that the Americans are helping him defeat Huerta. But in fact, it's the complete opposite. He's really mad. He doesn't like them. He says, this is a Mexican problem. Mexico. You are American. Now, you know what I say to Americans? Get out. I don't like you. Go away. And this is a Mexican issue. I can take care of it myself. So Woodrow Wilson says, all right. We'll pull out. That doesn't happen till later. So Huerta's end comes basically, Obregón marches into Mexico City against Huerta. And Pancho Villa also comes, but he comes later, so he doesn't get the glory. But Obregón comes in and he says, Huerta, you're dead. And Huerta is like, yeah, that's right, I'm out of here. So he flees to Europe in July 1914. And Carranza is put in charge. And the U.S. is like, are you sure you want us to leave? We can always stay. Let's try and stay. Come on, let us stay, please. They want to do that way, just to make sure that they kind of want to force Carranza to say like, all right, I'll protect your businesses. Just get out of here. When Carranza just says, no, just get out. I'm not making any deal with you. All right, I'm not gonna make any promises. So just get out. And the United States says, all right, fine, we'll leave. And they leave November 23rd, 1914, leaving Carranza in power. So that's the first part of the Mexican Revolution. And basically, we kind of see a stable Mexican government, a harsh, stable, and just Mexican government, yet stable. It's all toppled down because basically everyone wants something different. The poor want more. The poor want to have land. They want to at least make some money, and the rich want to keep getting richer, and they don't want to give any money to the poor, nor do they want to give any economic opportunities to the United States. And different rulers trying to handle this like slightly different ways ish, but they keep no matter what they always get in the way of what the people or what the rich want, and no matter what, fighting occurs. And I say first part because this doesn't end. Carranza's rule isn't permanent. We're gonna go into more detail with this with Mr. Page, but basically Carranza isn't a very good ruler. He actually kills Zapata. Well, he doesn't kill him, but his soldiers kill Zapata, and that basically makes him a horrible person, and someone kills Carranza. And then Obregón becomes president. And then Obregón that's kind of where the revolution ends. But basically, yeah, I mean, just two things are important here. One, it's basically all of Mexico. This isn't just like one region against another region. It's really everyone is all the same. In every region, there's a rich person and a poor person, and all the poor people kind of want the same thing, and all the rich people want kind of the same thing. So, this is how it all works out, and I hope you've been watching this video. I hope this helps. I really enjoy doing it. I like to take time to create scripts and give information, and I really just do this to help people. I really like doing these videos. Those 3 videos that I created last year about world history, they really changed me because I realized how much I can express myself in history, and how much I can show how much I love it, and how much passion I have for it, and how much I really just want to let go of anything that's holding me down and just be myself. This is where I can really be myself, and I hope you like this video. I hope this helps for the test, and yeah, see you later.